Hi, this is Glenn Guy from the Travel Photography Guru, and here's the latest instalment on my upcoming photography tour to China in January 2012. So this series of presentations follows on from a trip I did to China in January this year, 2011. It was important for me to undertake the tour or the trip at the same time of year that next year's tour will be running, so I could, fully test out all of the locations at that time of year, get an indication of what the weather would be like, transport conditions, etc., etc. So the idea is by looking at these images you'll get, I suppose, a good idea about the opportunities that would await you if you were to accompany me on the tour next year. So you can see this lass is pretty well geared up for the cold weather. And it was an interesting subject matter to photograph, particularly up against the beautiful, cool green wall, contrasting with the warmish skin tone and the warmish fur, that circular shape around the edge of her hat. So basically what I did on this particular occasion was, after I'd photographed the Forbidden City during the afternoon for several hours, I decided to continue walking and see what other photographic opportunities were available to me late afternoon through to early evening. And it was simply a matter of, I walked into the front entrance of the Forbidden City and walked out the back entrance after several hours photographing, and then just continued to walk. And this is pretty much how I plan my own personal trips and how I'm scheduling this upcoming trip to China in January of next year, 2012. It's going to be based on a fairly open schedule. Now, every day will be organised, but rather than strictly organising around meal times, the way that most tours are run, this is going to be scheduled predominantly around the photography opportunities. And if an opportunity comes up to deviate from the plan a little bit, there'll be time to do it. So on most days we wouldn't be visiting more than 2 different places, basically a morning and an afternoon session of photography. So clearly there's still time for 3 meals in the day, but as far as lunch and as far as dinner times go, we play that by ear a little bit. There's plenty of food to be had, but I'm not, it's the photography that comes first. And I'm sure that people who undertake the tour with me will understand and actually appreciate that sort of very open structure. So the thing was, I'd walked out of the Forbidden City into very heavy peak hour traffic, and I could have easily grabbed a cab and, maybe taken an hour to get back to my hotel. And I thought, well, it makes much more sense just to enjoy the late afternoon winter's light and see if I can make some photographs, just see what happens. So that's what I did. So it was an unplanned adventure, and they're often the best kind, aren't they? And, my thinking was, well, dinner can wait. So I probably walked for another couple kilometres from the back entrance of the Forbidden City. So this in itself made the little excursion worthwhile. Some of you would be aware of the game called Happy Sack. So it's a great cheap way to stay fit and to get out on a cold winter's day. I thought it was wonderful. It was almost like a dance occurring. So I took quite a few shots. And that's the front of that facade we looked at a moment ago. Some detail shots while I was there. Then discovered this lovely lake, which was actually icebound at that time of year. So this one was interesting to me because it's really contrasting the old and new, the traditional and the more modern. And you can see that even in the more modern buildings in the background, there are elements of that traditional architecture in some of the rooftops. Just a detail, close-up of a reflection in the window. So there are various ways you can approach a photo walk. The key thing is just to take an intuitive approach, just to suck it and see, literally arrive, see what's there and respond intuitively. But the sort of things you may be doing, the sort of approach you may take with your photography, is to explore things like viewpoint. For instance, get up very high and shoot downwards, and that's referred to as a bird's eye viewpoint. Or alternatively, get down very low and shoot upwards, referred to as a worm's eye viewpoint. Because if you think about it, we usually bring the camera to our eye. Very logical. Why do we do it? Because that's where our eye is. But if you do that all the time, your photographs tend to look the same because you're recording the world from a particular viewpoint and it doesn't change. So this is a really simple technique to add some interest to your photograph. And the other thing you can be doing is exploring space and perspective. So we'll look at a few examples as we go. So in this case, of course, looking up a little bit, this religious structure actually looks quite dominant, quite powerful, because it's shot from a lower angle of view. So looking up at an extreme angle always monumentalises the subject and gives it that extra sense of power. The alternative, from a hilltop looking down on the lake, some beautiful warm colours in the foreground contrasting with the cool coloured water, and of course the old traditional buildings in the foreground, old style buildings, contrasting with the modern city in the background. And the other thing to look at is consider, again, space. So the pathway, it does literally create a visual path through the photograph, but it also adds that extra sense of three-dimensional space. And again, because all photographs are two-dimensional, we perceive the world in 3 dimensions, but a photograph only has width and height. There's no depth in a photograph, but one way to give the perception of depth is including definite foreground, midground, background elements. And another way is just to frame a scene like this, where you're actually using the pathway as a compositional vehicle to actually bring the viewer's eye on a journey from foreground through to background. And there's this vanishing perspective going on here too, because you can see that the foreground elements, say for instance the columns on the right, and also the beams on the top of the image look much larger. And as you travel down towards the back of the image, the columns seem to get smaller, and the beams above also seem to get smaller. But in fact, they're all the same size. It's just a natural thing that occurs with perspective. A couple other things. Explore the colour of the light. And of course, late afternoon, early morning, the light's usually quite warm. And we can also explore the effect of that colour, the colour of the light, on the actual subjects we're photographing. So you may be photographing ice, but what colour will that ice photograph if lit by warm light, or alternatively if lit by cool light? Changes the mood. So you can see all the blue in the ice, and that's partly because of a blue sky above reflecting in the water, partly, or in the ice. I think it's undeniable that the blue adds a real sense of quiet to the image. And depending on the photograph, it can give a sense of serenity, peace. In other cases, it may suggest melancholy or sadness. Either way, it's a very emotive colour. Some photographs look great with music, as in a audio-visual, but also a still photograph can have a sense of music to it. You know, I think you could almost imagine some lovely piano music going with an image like this. So it's a quiet image, it's a peaceful image. Some ice piled up by the side of the lake, you know, crystal-like structure, and the light's coming slightly from the side, the warm light, and that's why the crystals on the top seem to have a very slight warmth to them, whilst the ones below, which are actually reflecting the blue light from the sky, are a very different colour. The warm and cool contrast beautifully together. It's always good to try to make images in sequences that tell stories, and you don't necessarily have to go out with a recipe, I'm going to do this shot first followed by that shot, but it's just good to be aware that your images can end up telling a story. Beijing in winter, or serenity amidst chaos. So that, might be, for instance, peak hour in Beijing, but if you walk a little ways, you can find a very, very quiet, traditional area. And as always, we're looking for iconic images and fleeting moments. And so we have to have the camera in hand, we have to have it ready, and we have to be able to respond quickly. And at the beginning of a photography trip, that may not be possible. It may take a day or two to actually get our eye in and get our eye, brain, hands working together in a way that enables us to take pictures quickly. And that's actually why I'm planning to start the trip in Beijing, because there's lots of opportunities to make interesting photographs. But by the time we get to some of the other destinations on the tour, we'll be well versed and we'll be able to make those shots quickly, so we won't miss anything. Flags which are lit by very soft light at the end of the day. Close-ups. I'm one for moving in and around the subject to explore it from different angles. There was no spectacular sunset, but there was a little bit of warmth which contrasted nicely with the cold blue light. So my suggestions would be, for an event like this, to embrace the weather. As long as you're dressed appropriately, you'll be fine. I wasn't cold at all. To celebrate the light, because often that's really what we're photographing. That's really what excites us to point our camera one direction or the next. The subject, you could actually argue, is the effect of light, its transforming nature on a thing. That really becomes the subject of the photograph. I think it's very important to have a positive attitude and be aware of our good fortune. I mean, for goodness sake, we're travelling to a foreign land and experiencing a culture very different than our own, and wandering around for 10 days making fantastic photographs with a group of like-minded people. That in itself is something worth celebrating. Be prepared to feel alive, to embrace the weather, to embrace the situation, and of course, dinner can wait. And I think with that attitude, we cannot go wrong, and we'll definitely come back with amazing photographs. And of course, we will all eat. So the trip will be in January 2012. It'll be 10 days. There'll be a maximum of 10 people. And accommodation will be included, as will all meals and internal flights in the country, plus any related local transport, taxis and the like. There will be a variety of photography theory and prac sessions, including some image processing. The exclusions, of course, would be your international airfares to and from China. That can't be factored into the cost because we may be coming from different parts of the world. Any drinks and snacks, and accommodation and any associated costs if you're planning to stay in the country for a longer period of time. So arriving earlier or leaving after the tour finishes. You can find me on my blog at travelphotographyguru.com, on Facebook, facebook.com travelphotographyguru, and also on Twitter, twitter.com/travelphotographyguru. Thanks so much for listening to this presentation. The next one will be, I think, fascinating. It'll be on the northern city of Harbin, quite close to Siberia and the border with North Korea, and that's going to there's going to be some fantastic images that I'll be sharing with you over coming days. So please stay tuned for that one, where we visit Snow World, Ice World, and do some local shooting in the city itself. So thanks again, and check back in the next couple of days for the next presentation. Bye for now.